Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and I thought I'd do a video going over the way I go about direct seeding my heat-loving plants, and I'm talking specifically about tomatoes, peppers, things like that. And I'm not saying I always have the greatest results. It's a very challenging environment where I live for growing things like that. Even if you put them in as transplants, it can be challenging here. It's just we have the frosts tend to be quite late here. We can get frosts in May, we can even get frost in June, and we can get frost in September. So we have a very short growing season where really tender plants like peppers and tomatoes are concerned. Um, so most people start them indoors under lights or in a nice sunny window and then harden them off and plant them out. I don't do that. And I've talked about this in other videos. I don't do it because I hate, mainly I hate doing it. I don't enjoy the transplanting process. And so I've figured out a way to just, and there's some old footage of me, I guess this was from last May 2020, planting tomatoes out in my garden. This video was released, I believe, in May 28th. Okay, is when the video came out. And there's these little. I'm just watching this on YouTube and doing a screen share for this video. So I would have probably done it the week before. So later in late May is when I would have done this. And really, what I'm looking for in terms of signs outdoors is it's around the same time as you'd plant potatoes. You're looking for the first flowers on your dandelions, for me anyway. And this is for, direct seeding tomato under a plastic dome. You can see behind me there's a plastic dome tipped upside down. So I'm basically creating, I don't have the conditions for direct seeding tomatoes. So what I'm doing is artificially creating the conditions by creating a microclimate in my garden. I know these videos, they play all year and people have questions all year. And lots of times people will say, that's impossible, that can't work, it would never work where I live. And sometimes this is people that are gardening in places that are warmer and sunnier than where I live. So it's like, well, buddy, like we get frost as late as June, and we get frost in September, and we kind of have a lousy spring because it's very foggy and overcast and so on and so forth. We don't get a lot of really great sun here. If I can do it, anyone with better conditions can do it. So I think it's just a question of understand. Perhaps over the years I've just not done a very good job of explaining my process. So I thought I'd take some time here to walk through all of that because there's a number of factors required. So here I am planting seeds, and you'll notice this is going to have a dome over this whole bed. This is a 4x8 bed, 4 feet wide by 8 feet long. And I'm going to be putting a plastic, polyethylene 6 mil poly dome over the top of it. And notice I've only got 2 rows planted, and the rest of the soil is sort of covered. And all I've done there is I've covered it with cardboard just to keep any sort of weeds from coming up. It just makes things easier. And also the parts that are covered don't dry out. So I'm just firming down the soil. I'm going to water it and put a dome over it. And once a week I check it. If it looks like it needs water, I water it. And on particularly sunny days, I'll vent it just by lifting it up and putting something underneath one end of the dome to just let the air out, let the heat out, sort of thing. But that's all I do, and I just keep an eye on it, and I keep it covered right up until July. Really. Usually we go away in July, so I have to take all the domes off in July because we're, just not around. I can't monitor them, but yeah, water them once a week and so on and so forth. But there's a lot more that goes into this than just that. I'm oversimplifying, of course. So let me just back up a little bit. Direct seeding, why do I do it? Well, number one, I don't have a good space in my house to do transplants. I just don't have the real estate. I don't have a really good, I've got one window that's south facing, and it's right next to our dining room table, and it's just not, a place that Mrs. Maritime Gardening is very big on me, setting up a massive grow operation. And there's just not a lot of room. There's not a big windowsill there. It's just not, the house just isn't conducive to it. Um, and I also don't really have a place to, I suppose I could set up some sort of operation with lights and so on and so forth, but I don't really enjoy that process either. And also I just find the hardening off process to be very tedious. If you make one mistake, you lose all your plants and all your work and all your effort. Um, and sometimes when you put the seeds or when you put the transplants in the ground, they can be set back. I'm not saying, I mean, lots of people transplant, it totally works and you can do it. But for me, I find this approach easier. And I find by having the plants in the ground from day one, um, they, uh, they really benefit from that, from being in the ground from day one. So here's some footage of, because having them in the ground from day one, they're getting full sun, full real sun from the minute they emerge from the soil. So they're completely hardened off and adapted to getting full real sun. Their roots are adapted to the type of soil that's in my garden. The plant and the roots are adapted to the range of temperatures that happen when a plant is outdoors, right? Where I live, around the time of year when you're transplanting tomatoes, late May, early June, it can get very cold at night and it can get very hot during the day, right? When your plants are indoors, they're kind of room temperature 24/7, right? That's not what it's like outside. It can get, down to like, I don't know, just above freezing at night, and of course during the day it can get, warmer than room temperature outdoors when you're in late May, early June. So by having them just start off that way, you're really cutting out, uh, you know, uh, you're cutting out a lot of the problems that can occur with tomatoes. So here's some tomatoes in late June. So the first video was sowing seeds in sort of mid to late May, and here I am showing the amount of growth that's occurred by June, and then by the end of June, right? And these still don't look like much. These plants would be about 6 inches high, and they still don't look like much. Um, but because they've been outside since day one, they got the good root development, they're completely adapted and acclimatized to being outdoors. They grow very fast over the summer. And also, and I'm going to get to this point a bit later in this video, I've chosen varieties that grow fast, that have a very short number of days to maturity. I've chosen, and I'm going to talk about this more too, indeterminate varieties that don't take as long to grow, tend to be faster growing, and even within the I choose determinate varieties. They grow a lot faster, and even within the determinate varieties, there's ones that grow faster than others. So I basically choose the fastest growing tomatoes I can find that are, going to give me the flavor and results and so on that I want, right? So that's a mathematics or an equation you have to do. So it's more than just me putting them under a plastic dome in May. It's choosing the variety and so on and so forth, right? And the big factor here, why this works, is because they're getting full sun from day one, and they're just getting, I mean, plants get their energy from the sun. A light bulb in your house is just not going to give them that amount of sun, right? So let me just stop this here, okay, and take you to walk through a little bit about different types of tomatoes. So number one, there's two different. I don't care if you buy who you buy your tomatoes from or what variety you choose or whatever. I'm on the website of the sponsor for my maritime gardening, but buy what you want where you want. Right? Just this the whole point is just to illustrate the options, right? If you go to a website of a place that sells sells tomatoes, right? An online, if you go to a garden store, because it's the COVID-19, you're probably going to be buying online. You're going to have a pretty wide variety of tomatoes to choose from, right? I think Vessi Seeds has got like, I don't know, 50 something different kinds. And there's other places you can go online where they got hundreds of different kinds of tomatoes, a lot of different kinds of tomatoes. But two main categories you're going to come across are determinate and indeterminate. So simply put, a determinate plant has a certain height it grows and then it stops gaining height. It stops putting on, it basically puts on height, puts on vegetative growth, and then it stops doing that and goes to flower and makes all its fruit. So the drawback with those is that at some point the tomato stops producing fruit. They don't just keep producing and producing and producing, right? Not a problem where I live because we get frost in September. So, really, we don't have, like, I used to live in southern Ontario and I could grow tomato plants 8 feet high. And I suppose even where I live now, Nova Scotia, there's hot, sunny parts of the province where you can pull that off inland. But I don't live inland. I'm just a couple kilometers from the ocean here. And I don't get those ideal conditions. So really, the determinate variety of tomato is the only game in town for me because that's the only thing that it grows fast enough, and I don't care that I'm going to get long-term perpetual harvest from the tomato. I mean, I want the tomato to put all its fruit right away. Another good point. So I choose the determinate one as opposed to the indeterminate. If you live in a nice sunny place, regardless of how you get your tomatoes started, maybe you want to have some determinants and some indeterminates perhaps. But the indeterminate ones are the ones that you can train them up on a long vine. They can just keep growing. They'll just keep going and going and going until you get a frost. Um, Determinants, they're more bush-like, bush habit. Usually you have to support them anyway, but they're more bush-like, and they put all the fruit in one big go. And for me, I kind of want that because I got to get I got to get everything I can get out of that plant before the frost comes. The frost's going to come. So that's one thing. Another thing is that it really depends on what your preferences are in your family. The only huge fan of tomatoes in my family, there's me, 2 kids, and my wife. The only huge fan of tomatoes in my family is me. I love tomato sandwiches. I like tomato this. I like tomato that. I like them in a salad. I really, really love tomatoes. If I'm out in the garden, I gorge on them. Sometimes in the summer, I'll get canker sores because I'm eating so many tomatoes, right? I really can't stop myself. I love tomatoes. But really, I'm eating most of them, so I only need so many. The other thing is, at least half the tomatoes I grow plum tomatoes, and I pickle them. I do lacto fermented plum tomatoes, and I just use them in all kinds of different cooking. I still have some in my fridge right now, and so half the tomatoes I grow, I don't care that they're not ready to eat in late July, early August. My main goal, at least half the tomatoes I grow, my main goal is to lacto ferment them. I want a number of jars of them stored in cold storage to use in a culinary sense over the course of the year. So the fact that the thing about the way I do my tomatoes is that a lot of them, they're really not ready till, late August. And they're all ready in one go, right? So the plum tomatoes are a perfect example, right? Roma tomatoes, that sort of thing. They're all ready, not at the same time, but let's say over the course of about 3 weeks, right? The plant's producing most of its tomatoes, and that's usually just before September, the last week of August, first few weeks of September, sort of thing, right? And I'm just madly trying to get them all stored and that sort of thing. So I don't mind so much that those ones come on late, and the maturity date of that plant doesn't matter so much as long as they mature and they put out their fruit before the frost comes, so I can get them fermented and get them stored in that way. If you don't know anything about fermented tomatoes, they're just fantastic. You can use them in all kinds of dishes. The juice is great in different things. You add a third of a cup of it to a soup. It makes a soup taste great. If you're making a pasta dish, you add a third of a cup of the juice to a pasta dish, and you add one of the tomatoes to a pasta. You can just add, I can't explain it, but it's kind of like In the same way, like adding bacon to things makes everything taste good if you like bacon. Adding fermented tomato and the juice from the fermented tomatoes to different things really, really works wonders. It's kind of like a special vinegar made from tomatoes with that sweetness and all the elements that make tomatoes nice. But uh, anyway, so the point is that at least half the tomatoes I grow, I don't care that they're not ready. I mean, a lot of people do their tomatoes really early in the year so that they can start eating tomatoes as early in the summer as possible. Half the tomatoes I grow, I don't really care about that. The other half I grow, I tend to choose things that grow really fast. So, like for example, this year, trying to remember what variety I chose. I think I chose, trying to find them here. I chose this Cherry Falls organic tomato. Now this is something you'd actually have like on a patio. But look at that thing. Look at that plant. So this is a cherry tomato, right? But it is so short and so stocky and so overwhelmingly determinate. I know it's got a fast maturity date. Vessi Seeds usually tells you what the time and maturity is. It doesn't say that here, but this is such a short plant. It's so small. It's basically a patio plant. Um, I know it's going to mature quickly. I know I'm going to start getting little cherry tomatoes fast. So I usually grow some cherry tomatoes. These are the ones I'm growing this 2021. Just because even though they're a patio plant, I don't care. I mean, these are for me, right? I'm going to grow like 6 plants or something like that, right? There's 20 seeds in a pack. Assume half your seeds are a failure, so that's 10. And then maybe I'll give a couple to my mom or something like that because she's got a deck. So, but I can almost guarantee this is a fast-growing cherry tomato. So just to get my tomato fix, I got some cherry tomatoes. This is the one I'm going to go with. This Cherry Falls type deal, right? Now, let me just go back here. The other one is that I chose. I mean, just to give you a contrast, right? Here's what's this one? Big beef tomato. I think I grew this one last year. It says maturity 73 days from transplanting. That's not bad. I mean, some tomatoes have maturities of like 110 days and so on and so forth, right? There's different varieties with different days to maturity. Let's look at this big brandy here. What's that? Most of them have 80, matures in 80 days, right? And if it says 73 days from transplanting, that means add a month to that, right? That's like a 100-day tomato, right? Because transplant, you're going to have it, it's going to take a week to germinate, 2-3 weeks to the plant to put on size or more, depending on how early you start them. And look, it's the end of February. I'm doing a tomato video here, but I would not start your transplants now. I wouldn't personally where I live. I would start when I used to do this thing, when I used to start my transplants indoors. I wouldn't start tomatoes till April, really, because you're not going to be able to. Where I live, you're not going. The soil isn't warm enough to plant tomatoes. It might be warm enough outdoors, but the soil doesn't warm up till like the end of May. I've lots of years. I've either grown my own transplants or just bought them at a garden center, and I've stuck them. You have a beautiful, nice, warm weekend in May, and you stick your transplants outdoors because you've hired them off and everything, but you stick them in the ground because you're all excited, and you just watch them wither and die, or they're just stunted permanently, right? Because it's just the soil hasn't warmed up enough yet because the tomato roots don't like cold ground, right? That's another good reason to direct seed. The seeds aren't going to germinate until the ground's warm enough for tomatoes, right? And of course, you've got them in this little, protected dome to create a sort of microclimate that keeps them abnormally warm. So yeah, the Cherry Falls organic. What's the other one I got? I don't know why I didn't get the Cobra, but last year I used this Heinz 50. This one Heinz 2653. I was really happy with those, but apparently they're sold out of those, so I couldn't get them this year. They're a great productive plant, and I pickled some of these too. This year I got the red alert. I could have also I might have ordered the Premio and changed my mind. I don't know, but this is a nice one looking too. But look at this red alert. Look at the, you click on this. Look at the days to maturity. This is why I bought it. 50 to 55 days from transplanting, right? That's fast, right? That's a good one, right? So when you think about, if I stick them in the ground the end of May, and then, 50 to 55 days, that's basically 2 months, give or take. And of course, that number, 50 to 55 days from transplanting, that's like an average, right? Days doesn't really matter. It's like, that means days of average sun. And what does average sun mean, right? The, the number of days a plant takes to mature is, what you're really counting is the amount of sunlight that plant has absorbed. And nutrients is taken up from the ground. So when they say 50 to 55 days, that's a ballpark, right? That just means in 50 to 55 days, that plant should have gathered enough sunlight and grown enough to mature. Doesn't mean it will. If it's really foggy and cloudy and rainy and cold and, so on and so forth, it might take even longer than that. Another reason to create that little microclimate, that plastic dome like I do. If you live somewhere with, sort of sketchy summer conditions, sketchy springs and conditions, right? Where you will get some nice sunny days, but you also have a lot of foggy, overcast, cloudy, sort of cool spring days. That cool, cloudy, overcast spring day isn't a day from a tomato's point of view. It's half a day, right? It takes 2 of those days for a tomato to do 1 day's worth of growing. So all these numbers, you have to bear that in mind. So that's why you want to choose, if you're trying to grow tomatoes somewhere that doesn't have an ideal sunny, hot type conditions, you want to get that days to maturity as short as possible to give yourself enough runway to get that tomato going. But the reason I went with the red alert is that that's a short, right? There's other varieties too that are like that, right? So I mean, the only way to, and the way I do it is, I just clicked every single one of these and looked at the days. This one's 57 days, right? And I mean, you can choose different ones. I don't know why I chose this one in particular at the time. I like the clustering habit as well. But sometimes it's, what you want is the best combination of, short number of days to maturity, great flavor, and resistance to diseases, right? Like this one says tolerance to tomato mosaic virus, fusarium and verticillum wilt, blah, 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 right? So, your ideal tomato is the fastest growing, most disease resistant, tastiest tomato. And you really don't know about all those things. If the taste is so personal, right? So, I mean, if you're reading a write-up in a seed catalog, the days to maturity, you got to weigh that against what kind of days, how sunny are your days. You can pretty much take them at their word when they say it's resistant to this or resistant to that. But the flavor, that's all you, right? There's lots of people that say oysters taste good, and I think they taste good, but other people think they taste like snot, right? So it really depends. It's very personal. So you're not going to know. And for me, like I went with these red alert tomatoes. I don't think I've ever grown them before. I just thought I'd try them because I like this clustering. I used to grow a variety of tomato called Cascade, and it looked like these, and they grew fast, and they grew in clusters, and I really like them. So it's the closest thing to Cascade. And they had like a 50-day days to maturity growing habit. And they were also, I think they were determinate. These red alerts, I think, are determinate. Yeah, determinate plants, right? So I was going for something along those lines. I thought I'd give these a try. But I'm not going to know till August if these taste good. Right? So who knows? I mean, that's the great thing about gardening, eh? Every year you try something different. If I recall, just look at my little list of things I ordered. Plum Regal, that's what so I got the red alert, but I got Plum Regal. So let's check that one out. Where is that one? Did I go buy it already? Scotia's another classic one for here. I've grown them before. They're a great tomato. I always feel like I have to try something new every year. I believe I usually keep records of these things. Last year, did I grow with I went Heinz 57. I actually don't. Yeah, Heinz 57 must have been my tomato sauce, sort of pickling tomato. But this year I'm going with the Plum Regal. So let's check out the Plum Regal. Where is that? There's the Plum Regal right there. Bessie's top pick, Plum Regal. Let's have a look at that one. I could have sworn I grew that last year. I must have grown it before. Excellent late blight resistance, determinant, great for sauces and salsa, 4-ounce hybrid, bright red interior, da 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 da, great texture, crack resistance. Look, Verticulum, Fusarium wilt, early blight, tomato. Look at it. So it's resistant to all these things. You know, not as fast maturing as the Red Alert, but as I said before, I don't really care about a plum tomato because this is more of a preserving tomato, not a, tomato sandwich, summer salad sort of tomato. This is more of a storing tomato, right? So that's what I'm choosing these for. So I don't mind that they're going to come along a few weeks later. I don't care if they're all, you know, all come off in one big go. Um, so anyway, that's I don't know if I've answered all the questions, but that's a little bit more detail, a little bit more context on how I choose my tomato varieties and what I'm going with this year and how I'm going to do it. I'm going to put these under plastic outdoors when I see usually for me when I see dandelion flowers, that's when you plant your potatoes. And a potato is the same family as a tomato. Uh, so, I mean, it's still a bit cold when dandelions make their flowers. But potatoes, you plant them underground, right? And they can handle being like, in 5 degrees Celsius. They can handle colder temperatures than a tomato. But I figure the tomato seed is tougher than the tomato plant. And you know that because you have tomatoes coming up wild in your garden every single year. So you know a tomato seed is tougher than, right? You can have tomato seeds just over winter and come up in the spring. So a tomato seed is tougher than a tomato plant. So when I see the sunflower flower, that's when the tomato seeds go in under a plastic dome. I create a little microclimate. So, and generally speaking, when you've got a little dome like that, that little piece of ground that you've got the dome over, you've moved it ahead, let's say, a month, right? So when I stick a dome over one of my pieces of garden in late May, from that patch of soil's point of view, it's sometime in mid to late June, right? You're moving it ahead because you're just making it warmer. It's, it gathers more heat during the day, doesn't cool off as quickly at night. It's like you're creating a longer day. The amount of sunlight's the same as everywhere else in your garden, but the effect of the sun on the soil where that plant is growing is different under the plastic dome, right? So that's when I do that. And the same can be said for when you're choosing things like peppers, right? So if I look at peppers, which ones did I choose this year? Pepper, where is it? Carmen, that's the one I went with. I went with a different one last year. This year I went with Carmen. So let's check that out. So let's see. Show more. Peppers. And last year I went with, I can't remember what it's called. New Ace. I went with a New Ace pepper last year. But, and they worked out great. I mean, I got peppers. I got peppers just before the frost came. And, honestly, I didn't go through every single one of these. But you can see peppers have they take longer to germinate than tomatoes. And generally speaking, they take longer to mature. Look at these red peppers, and these are more of a hot type. I like the sweet kind because we use them in more things. But these ones mature in 75 to 80 days, right? Let's just take a look at the one I chose, the Carmen. Where is it now? Page 1. Carmen. Bessie. Oh, damn, I just clicked the wrong thing. Yeah, Bessie's. Carmen. 80 days. 80 days to red from transplanting. So, a lot of things have to go right for, you don't have the same. I mean, last year my peppers, they all developed in September. And so for September, and I brought them all in, and we had fresh peppers from the garden in September and October, but all the peppers had been brought in. They were in the garage, and they'll keep a few weeks, sort of in storage indoors, right? So we were just eating peppers, and they were coming out our ears. So, if I was going to start something indoors and baby something along, peppers might be one of the things I would do, or just buy the transplants from a garden center. But these ones are pretty fast. If you look at some of the other varieties of pepper, check out this Aristotle. Oh, of course, it doesn't say doesn't say how quick those are to mature. Let's check another one here. Let's check a Chesapeake pepper. What's that one all about? Of course, that one. Why doesn't it say that? That's the most, like for me, this would all be a spreadsheet, and you could just search it, in terms of, let's check out candy cane here. Does that one say? Matures in 60 to 65 days. Why didn't I order this? I should have ordered this one. Ornamental as it is edible. Maybe that threw me off, because ornamental, that's the last thing on my list. But my goodness, 60 to 65 days. I wonder if I can change my order. 30,000 Scoville units. Does that make it a hot one? I don't know. It says sweet, unique sweet variety, so it can't be that hot. But that's a fast turnaround. Man, oh man, maybe I should rethink this. Maybe I was in a rush when I was doing this. It does take time. What's this one here? Fat and sassy. 65 days. Jeez, what was I? Why did I choose that other one? I'm going to call them and see if I can change my order. I wonder what this one's like. 60 days. Okay. 60 days yellow, 80 days red. Yeah, maybe I might have gone with the wrong pepper. I think I went with the Carmen because it was like I like the look of it. I like the picture. And I must have thought 80 days was a good number, but 60 days is better. So I'm going to rethink this, but that's the trick. When you're going to be direct seeding things like that, you want that days to maturity number to be as short as possible if you want to get results. And of course, the warmer and sunnier it is. So, I mean, if you're somewhere like I used to live in Southern Ontario, I lived there for 6 years in Hamilton, Ontario. One day in Hamilton in June is like a day and a half where I am here in terms of heat and sun. It's just hotter and sunnier there. That's just it. Even though it's north of here, they don't have that cooling effect of the ocean here. I'm sort of coastal. So from a pepper's point of view, it takes about a day and a half for a plant to gather the same amount of heat and sunlight that it would get in one day in a place like that. So all these things have to be just weighed and considered when you're making all those decisions. So anyway, think about it this year if you're gonna do a little experimentation and maybe direct seed some things outdoors under microclimates as opposed to transplanting. But even if you're transplanting, if you got a shorter growing season, the days to maturity and the growing habit, whether it's indeterminate or determinate, these things really matter in terms of getting the most yield out of your plant. You really can't change the climate where you are. So pick a variety that works with your length of growing season and the constraints you're working with. So hope you found it interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.